The Thames Valley District School Board is the fourth largest in the province, with over 80,000 students in 160 schools across 3 counties, including London and St Thomas. And today I'm joined by Mark Fisher, the Director of Education for the Thames Valley District School Board. Thanks for your time today, Mark.
Hi, Shane. Hope you're staying well.
I am. And how's your family going? I understand you've got a couple of kids at home.
Yeah, I have a 16-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son, and we're doing our best to keep everybody healthy and happy.
I understand. So it was the end of March you reached out to families about the need for access to technology. Do you know how many devices have been distributed to students so far?
Yeah, it's been an incredible accomplishment. We've distributed, cleaned, packaged, and deployed over 12,000 Chromebooks and another 2,500 devices, mostly iPads and iPhones. So really, now we've distributed over 14,000 devices
Wow.
since the middle of March.
Wow. And are there still some students who don't have access to devices or even the internet?
So really, we're down to just the deployment of devices for families that don't have access to the internet. We had approximately 1,000 families indicate that they don't have access. And so this week alone, we distributed 200 iPhones that are cellular enabled, and we had another approximately 600 iPads that have come in this week and will be distributed next week. There are some families in our district that elect not to access the internet, mostly for religious reasons. And for those families, we are distributing print resources and print materials.
And what's the process there?
So it's a pretty fascinating process because we want to follow safe handling of product guidelines. So what we do is we have individual teachers identify which students don't have access to the internet, and they email lessons and assignments to us at the board office. And we have a really select small crew of people working, printing off all those materials. And then we send those materials out through Canada Post and through courier to those families. So we did, I think, maybe 700 plus packages last week. This number went down slightly this week, but we are leaving no stone unturned to make sure that we serve all the students in the district.
So is that the administration staff working behind the scenes there?
Yeah, we have some key people in our print resource and our communications department taking that material, organizing it, deploying it, and then delivering it.
And what about the teachers? Were there some staff who needed computers?
Yeah, we have probably just over 600 staff that needed computers. I would say those are predominantly people in other functions like our payroll function, our accounts payable function, and then we have some secretaries and some guidance counselors that needed access to student databases, specialized software that they couldn't put on their own computer around timetables and other important kind of information to stay in contact with students.
Gotcha. And so what's the transition like being for teaching remotely for the school board?
So if you think about this, like you've had a system of education that's kind of functioned for well over 100 years, and in a matter of a few short weeks, you've completely transformed that into an emergency distance learning or an online platform. And you're doing that during the COVID-19 pandemic, and you're doing that following safety guidelines to make sure that nobody is jeopardized or put at risk. So I'm really proud of our staff and the accomplishments and how they've been able to do that rapidly. We have also done a lot of training for staff on these different digital platforms because the reality of the situation was that not every teacher was comfortable with technology. But we are providing tons of training. We've had huge uptake from our staff, and I'm just amazed at how quickly this transformation has taken place.
What do you feel like the rate of success has been so far?
Well, it's interesting because we just have surveyed our entire community. We surveyed families and students and staff, and I believe we had over, I think, 20,000 responses from our community and over 3,000 responses from our staff. Basically, what are we doing well? Where do we need to improve? So what we're hearing from our community is that they're really pleased with the amount of communication and information they're receiving both from the board, from their principals, and from their teachers. And that in terms, approximately 80% said that they were receiving the right amount of work per week for their children. 10% thought they weren't getting enough. 10% thought they were getting too much. So it's tough to find that sweet spot, but our teachers are really, asking for a lot of feedback from the community about what the right amount of work is for students, recognizing that students' living conditions and circumstances are quite variable right now.
And do you have like any barometers of how much learning students should be doing each day?
Yeah, we have guidelines from the ministry. So roughly, for students that are younger in elementary schools, it's roughly 5 hours a week. As they get into later elementary school, that moves up to about 10 hours per week. And when you're in high school, we're looking at approximately 3 hours per week per course. So typical course load would be 4 courses. So you'd have 12 hours a week. And it's interesting, as I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, I'm a parent. So I've been working with both of my children. My daughter, who's in grade 10, really doesn't want me involved too much, and she's hitting all of her milestones. But my son, who's 9, he definitely needs a lot more support just to kind of get used to this new way of learning and interacting.
And you have this do no harm philosophy. Like, what's the expectations of the students?
So I think I'm really proud of this do no harm philosophy. We were one of the first boards in the entire province to move out with this. And so really the philosophy behind this is that student well-being and staff well-being is of paramount importance right now. I didn't want any student in grade 12 to feel that their year would be jeopardized and they wouldn't graduate. I didn't want any student in grade 8 to feel that they wouldn't be transitioning and moving to high school. So we made a decision early on to say that the grade that you had between September and March was really the bottom line or the baseline grade that you would have. And anything that you did beyond that time would only move to put your grade up should your work warrant that. And what I want from my teachers and our staff, our students moving on is really a focus on assessment. And so what I mean by that is feedback about how you're doing, application of that feedback to improve. So the focus is more on learning versus categorizing and sifting and sorting students.
Gotcha. And are you finding there certain things that work better depending on the age group?
Well, it's interesting. I think a lot of it is the comfort level of the students and the comfort level of the staff. So what I'm finding is for most students, the transition to this online digital platform has been relatively seamless. And I mean, I'm not sure if you have children, but these kids, I mean, this is their world, so it's no big deal for even young students to think about interacting through digital platforms. Some of our staff were a little bit more reluctant, but what I'm really excited to report is that once our teachers are comfortable with the technology, they're really doing exciting things. Now, all that being said, the other message that we're getting from our staff and from our students is that nothing really replaces that face-to-face interaction and the opportunity to work together in groups. And so that has been a little bit more challenging in this environment. So what I'm hoping is as we move forward and eventually get back to more traditional interaction face-to-face, that we will pull some of these digital lessons forward and we'll be able to apply them, but still have more of that group face-to-face learning experience.
Gotcha. Do you have any tips for parents stressed out about helping their kids at home?
Yeah, I do want to say to parents that we recognize the challenge of trying to balance, education at home with other demands that you have. So I want you to make sure you don't feel a need to exceed those guidelines I talked about in terms of the amount of hours per week. If your circumstances are so challenging that that is difficult for you, I would encourage you to reach out directly to your teacher or to your school principal. And we have been doing that. We've had a lot of contact. The main focus here is making sure that everybody is coping with that from a well-being perspective. So try to lower the temperature. There's nothing that's going to happen between March and June that is going to negatively adverse your child's ability to succeed next year. So engage to the degree that you can engage. Give yourself permission not to be perfect, and just do what you can do.
And what challenges do you think students with special needs are facing right now?
Well, it's interesting. Students with special needs, I mean, one of the things is structure is very, very important, and the ability to come to school every day, to be in a contained environment that has all of their specialized resources and has all the supports that they need is really, really, really beneficial. So for students with special needs, they are missing that social interaction. They are missing that regular structure. We have done our best to make sure that all the equipment that those kind of students would need, like specialized computers, walkers, tricycles, things like that, that we have distributed and deployed all of those back out to the system, but we recognize that a lot of care is needed, and we have educational assistants and teachers that are reaching out on a regular basis to those families to try to facilitate and maintain those social interactions and social connections.
And do you think like some children that have higher learning needs do better in face-to-face settings?
Yeah, I think every student has different preferred learning styles. I think the key, whether it's face to face or digital, is to try to understand the very specific needs of each learner and what their gaps are, and then customize the program to meet those gaps. And there's no doubt that the face to face is the preferred option. I think there's a lot of benefits to distance learning, but the face to face is the preferred option.
Yeah. So, how difficult of a decision was it to cancel the graduations and the end of year formals?
Yeah, it was really a challenging decision for us to make. We recognize how important formals and graduations are for students, and these milestones are really important to mark. However, currently, when we have restrictions on public gatherings of 5 people or less, it just not was not realistic or not feasible to even think about graduations. I made the decision to go out early on that so people would know and could make alternate plans. Our commitment for all students in grade 12 is that your graduation will not be canceled, but it will be happening in the fall through a commencement or a convocation. And I also recognize that there's a lot of front loading and a lot of work that needs to happen to make sure that these go off well. And I didn't want people putting in unnecessary time and effort for something that was unlikely to happen in the short term.
So no plans for like virtual ceremonies?
Well, I think we have some schools that kind of on an ad hoc basis are looking at some plans around virtual ceremonies. And I like to see that innovation and creativity. But our goal is, if we get the green light around social gatherings, to make sure that we have these formal ceremonies in the fall.
Now, the province is talking about a phased relaxing of emergency measures. What are your thoughts on the rest of the school year? Do you think students will return?
So, I mean, our hope is that we have some sort of limited access to schools in June that would allow our staff to get in there and get things set up, and would also allow our students an opportunity to retrieve all their necessary personal belongings. And then that would give us an opportunity to do the deep cleaning and get everything ready. And then our real plan is hopefully for re-entry in September, although that re-entry in September might look a little bit different than what we've had up till now.
And so you're planning for that re-entry in September, or?
Yeah, we're planning for any eventuality, whether we go back, to the way it was prior, or whether we're looking at different schedules or different configurations. We're basically exploring all options. We're watching very carefully what's happening in the province of Quebec as a test case to see how things go there. And we have lots of planning tables currently running around how to successfully restart a system. And as I said, and you said in your intro, we have 80,000 students, over 160 schools. We're the fourth largest district in the province, so it's a big undertaking.
Now, the Minister of Education announced expanded summer learning program. Do you know what that will look like?
We haven't got a lot of the concrete details yet about that announcement, but we will be offering summer school through Thames Valley District School Board, and that summer school will be distance learning and virtual in nature. We will not be offering face-to-face summer school, but we will be offering a full slate of courses for students.
And anything else you want to add today?
I just like to reinforce that we are implementing this do no harm philosophy, that no student will be disadvantaged because of that. I do want to put a shout out to all the members of our community and all the efforts that they have made, and that we are progressing. There's a ton of resources available, and we're in consistent and contact. We will be surveying you and looking for information, and that we have this, and we're going to make sure that your students do not suffer. In fact, they're going to continue to thrive.
Great. Thanks for your time today, Mark.
I appreciate that. You stay well, Shane.
You too.
Bye.